Hi everyone, thanks for joining today's grants information session. Before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet, the Wurundjeri Willen people of the Kulin Nations, and pay respect to elders past, present and emerging. I recognise that some people may not be on Wurundjeri country, so I also extend respect to the lands on which you are today. So just a little bit of housekeeping first off. We've got Sarah and Nicola running things in the background for us. So if you've got any questions, feel free to put them in the chat and we'll get to them as we go through the presentation. Also, today's presentation is being recorded and we'll make that available on our YouTube channel and we'll link it to our website too so that you can access that later on to watch back as you need. So if we've got the presentation up. Everyone. Cool, so we've got the presentation up now. All right, so any information on council grant programs is available on our grants webpage. You can see we've got the website there, and as you may or may not have known, realised, we've rejigged our grant programs this year so that they respond to COVID, and they're all linked on that webpage there in the little red circle. So before you start writing your grant application or start looking for grant opportunities, you need to make sure you've got a clear plan for your funding. So that will direct which grants you're looking for. You'll have to have approval from your board or committee to know that you're okay to proceed to find funds and how to use them. It's always important to have one person in charge of writing the grant. You definitely can get input from different people, but it makes the process a lot easier if you've got the one person actually writing the application. Always make sure you've given yourself enough time. I think a lot of people, myself included, underestimate how long it takes to write an application, and keep in mind that you may have to get documents and supporting evidence from other people. Grant makers or people that are giving out grants also like to see that you're investing in the project as well. That might be in terms of providing cash to support the project, or it's volunteer hours, so the time that you're putting into making this happen. Know where you get your funds from currently, so who are your supporters already, and keep your board or committee updated on the progress of the application, right from submission through to receiving the grant or receiving notification of the outcome. So onto our COVID response funding. So it's a suite of 3 grant programs that we've designed to support community connectedness as we come out of lockdown. The 3 grant programs that make up the COVID response funding are the Equipment Grant Program, which closes on Friday, the Community Group Support Grant Program, and the Reconnection Grant Program. So who can apply for all 3 of those grants? You need to be a not-for-profit group that includes kindergarten, primary schools and secondary schools. Definitely check back with the guidelines that are online, because there are additional criteria for each of those grant programs. You need to be incorporated or partnered by an incorporated organisation. You need to have an ABN number or qualify to submit a statement by supplier. And you need to have public liability insurance for the event, project or activity that you're applying for. So we'll get into a bit more specifics. So the Equipment Grant Program it's a one-time only opportunity. We don't often have these opportunities that you can purchase equipment only, and it's up to $1,000. So like we said, it's available for not-for-profit groups to cover equipment purchases and operational costs that support your group's activities, both COVID recovery activities and beyond. So operational costs looks at things like your public liability insurance or incorporation fees, and then equipment relevant to your activities. So key dates, as I mentioned, this one does close on Friday, and you'll know the outcome of your application in September, and you'll have 6 months to make those equipment purchases or fund those operational costs. So the applications are assessed based on your group's location, your current cash balance, which you can provide your most recent financial statement. So that usually comes as part of your AGM minutes. And we look at your membership as well. So how many of your members live within the city of Whittlesea? I might just pause for a second there and see if we've got any questions. No, it doesn't.
We've got a question from someone who can't see the presentation. Can we just check that it's all working?
So the content is appearing on my screen as the producer, so I'm not sure why it wouldn't be specifically working for one person. So can they hear it? I just can't see this. Right. They just can't see the link.
They can't hear it, can't see it.
Yeah. Okay. Could be that there's a delay, although it's a fairly long delay.
So what we might do if it's not working and if we can't get it up and running now, if you wanted to try providing your email address there, I'll flick out a copy of the presentation, if you don't mind your email address being in that chat.
Yeah, no problem.
Cool. Have we got any other questions?
Yes, another person said, is that either associated members or participants?
So I guess it can be both. If you're a group that provides support to other community members, so I'm thinking about some of our groups that provide food relief packages, then you would be looking at the people that, so your volunteers and your members that do that work. You wouldn't list the people that receive your support. Maybe if we've got one more question. What we will do with these questions that are coming through as well, we will make sure we get to all of them, and we'll put up some frequently asked questions on our website so that you can refer back to that if we don't get to your question in this session. Do we have one more there? Okay, so we've got, so we only had a short timeline to submit. To meet the current COVID situation. So we did have it open for 4 weeks. So this is the end of the 4 weeks. We will kind of review as we go along. I know with stage 4 restrictions coming into play, people may or may not be in a position to think about applying for these equipment grants right now. So kind of watch this space, and we may have something else coming in the coming months. So that's the equipment grants. The community group support grants, which opened last week. So this grant program is, again, a one-time only opportunity, which provides financial assistance of up to $2,000 for your community group. And this one is available to support community groups reconnect with each other. So to get your group members starting to come back to each other and start getting back to those pre-COVID activities, or transitioning to new ways of operation. So that might be moving some of your activities online. So these grants, like I said, opened last week, and they close in mid-September. You'll have until the middle of next year to complete the activities that you're applying for. And they'll be assessed based on these 4 criteria. So we'll look at the aims and outcomes of your application, so what you want to achieve, the local need. So that's looking at how your group's been impacted. So have you completely not been able to see each other? Have you stayed connected through Zoom or something similar? Your group sustainability. So how is that activity going to help your group continue into the future? So not just now in this kind of COVID era. And then equity, access and inclusion looks at how you'll engage and involve people from diverse backgrounds. Cool. The final program is the Reconnection grant program. So this is our bigger one. It's up to $5,000 to support projects, events that the wider community can be involved in. So this grant program is very similar to, it's kind of a combination of our community development grants and our event funding program, where whatever the activity is that you're running, the project event needs to be open to the wider community. And we understand that restrictions may be in place for quite a while longer. So it's definitely in line with whatever those restrictions are. So this one, we're going to hold 2 rounds for this one. So the first one is opening next month, and we'll have the second round opening in March next year. And you'll have 12 months to complete those projects or events. Cool. Assessment of those ones is a little bit similar to the community group support grants. This one has 6 criteria that we'll look at. So again, aims and outcomes, local need, local support, community equity, access and inclusion, project sustainability. So the outcomes of your project, how will they be ongoing? And we'll look at the budget as well, and whether you've got experience or how you've thought about how this all, how you'll facilitate this project. Cool. Before we get into the next section, we'll see if we've got some more questions.
I think we've answered most of them there in the Q&A.
Yeah. Cool. So when you're planning to write an application, and this is across the board, not just for council ones, not just for these COVID response grants, make sure you read the guidelines to make sure that your group and your project or your equipment purchase is eligible. Double check that to make sure. It's always a really great idea to make contact with whoever is providing the grant. That way you can clarify any questions, and trust me, there is no silly questions when it comes to grants. You can also, it kind of puts you on the radar of the person that's giving out the funds. So when they read your application, it rings a bell. So yeah, checking you're eligible. Check your funding limits as well. While some grants will allow you to fund part of the project, so you might have a $10,000 project and you're asking one grant maker for $5,000. There are some that want that whole amount to be covered by the grant, or they may ask that you supply the equal amount. So if you're applying for a $5,000 grant, you need to supply $5,000 as well. So just keep an eye on those. So familiarise yourself with the assessment criteria. If you've got any questions, always ask. Plan your project or event. It's always better to find funding for something you've got planned rather than plan something for the money that you're getting. Supply all the information and documents requested. So it's always a good idea to check through the application, see what needs to be uploaded or what they're asking for, and go away, collect all the information and come back and complete that application. That might be things like your ABN number, an incorporation number, insurance certificates. There could be a range of things depending on the grant. And make sure you plan your grant writing around the timelines. So try not to leave it till the last day or so, because you may have to go and find some of that information, which takes time, and you may miss the deadline. And a lot of grant programs won't accept late applications. So it's really important to keep that in your calendar. I think the best way to make sure you get the information that you need into an application is to cover off on who, what, where, when, why, and how. So when thinking about who is the event or project for and who will it benefit? And also who are the stakeholders? So who are you going to partner with to produce the event or project? What is looking at what the project or event will contribute to the community, how it's going to support the community, where it's going to be located. That's often, hopefully, one of the easier questions to answer. Also, when it will happen. We understand, especially for these COVID response grants, that things may change and that they may have to be pushed back, but it's always a good idea to have some dates in mind. Thinking about why the project's needed. What are you trying to achieve out of it? Why is it important to the area as well? So if you're having something specifically in Whittlesea Township, why is it important for that event to be held there? And is there community support for it? Also thinking about how you'll start and finish the project or event, how much it'll cost in total, how much funding is needed from grants as opposed to how much you can provide from your group or how much other support you're going to need from other providers. So to make sure your application is as strong as possible, make sure it's clear how your event or project celebrates people and place. So again, it kind of comes back to the why. Evidence of demonstrable need or desire within the community. So that's trying to provide support. It might be that you've had a lot of people come to your group and say, this is what we need. You might find some statistics online about, different cultural groups that live in the area, and that's why the project's needed. It's always good to align it with something that the grant maker is already doing. So for council, we would look at how your project aligns with our council plan, Whittlesea 2040. It's always a good idea to also show how you will make or how you will develop the project or event for future years. So sometimes a one-off event is great, but it's also awesome if you can see it grow from year to year, so to get it bigger. Will you be able to run it year after year? And if you've got other areas that it impacts, like other social areas, so if it also has an environmental impact, all the better. So just some things to remember. So use clear, straightforward language. We don't expect it to be a massive amount of work. I think most of the questions that council asks answers for, we only ask up to about 150, 200 words, and just use clear, everyday language. You don't have to make it super fancy. So write in the active voice. So we will do ABC. So be reasonable and realistic. So again, if there's only 2 people working on the project and there's work, it seems like there's work for 20 people, it may not be achievable. Be positive, passionate, and persuasive. So you are trying to make a little bit of an emotional connection with whoever's assessing the application. So really use persuasive language that'll get them to understand why you need this money for this project. Try and provide all the information and documentation you need when you write the application, rather than the grant administrator having to come back to you for information. There are some grant programs that won't offer that step. Check your spelling, grammar, facts and figures. That being said, we understand that a lot of people have English as a second, third, fourth language. So you won't lose points for spelling mistakes. If you need to, if it makes it clearer for you to answer it using dot points, then that's more than fine as well, as long as you cover off on those things that we mentioned: who, when, what, where, and why. Make sure that your budget adds up. Some applications that you'll complete will add it up for you. I know for one of the applications that we've got at the moment, if it's over the maximum amount that you can apply for, then it won't actually let you submit. So you just make sure you've allocated $200 for catering rather than $2,000. Make sure that dot point's in the right place. And again, don't leave it till the last minute. Try and get in as early as you can. Give yourself time. It's less stress for you. So the next steps, if you've got any questions about the grant programs, any one of the grant programs, please feel free to get in touch with me via email or phone. And the online applications are via Smarty Grants. If you need hard copy forms, then get in touch. We're happy to do that as well. And we've flown through that. It's taken not as long as I expected. Do we have any other questions?
I think everything, yeah, they've all been answered in the Q&A there now. We just responded to a few people with their emails that we're going to send the presentation through, and we'll make all the links available where they can download them after as well.
All right, excellent. So I guess if there's no other questions, thank you everyone for tuning in. We will make all this information available to you, and please feel free to reach out if you've got any questions about the grants. Thanks.